Welcome back to another Lab tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about one little thing. And it's a very little thing. It's a very simple thing. One little thing you can do to make your mixes cleaner, to get rid of that muddy, washed out sound, to get more bass and more impact from your bass instruments or elements in your mix. And it's something that is easily overlooked. So let's jump right into this. It's about the idea that less is more. And I know that sounds confusing at first, but trust me, I've trained artists all over the world for many years, and many of them are quite resistant to this idea at first, especially those who produce electronic or bass heavy types of music. Because more equals more, right? Well, actually, no. And it really just kind of comes down to the idea that there's only one frequency range at the end of the day for your music. There may be 100 different tracks in your project, and each one is meticulously handled. Each one sounds great on their own, but unfortunately, they all need to play nicely together. They all need a space in the mix. And we're going to cover how to make that possible, or a bit easier anyway, through one proactive measure that you can apply to just about every single sound in your mix. And of course, the end game here, the end goal is to create more room, just in general in your mix, of course, but for those bass heavy elements, that's what people really want these days. So we're going to show you how to do that. We're going to use, instead of how a lot of other people try to approach this when explaining this concept, is they'll take a bunch of sounds, basically a full mix, and they'll let you listen to how those bass elements sound, how the song itself sounds overall, and they'll start making adjustments, and then they'll let you listen to it again at the end, and you can form your own opinion about it at that point. But what I'm going to do is show you with just one sound, one very common sound, how this theory actually works. Because without that, I feel like there's just too much room for questions that could be answered very easily by just focusing on one thing. So here we go. We're going to look at rain, the sound of rain. And this is a pretty common type of field recording or found sound, environmental sound that you hear in music, commercials, movies, television shows. It's everywhere. It's everywhere around us. So let's listen to this for just 1 second. And the very first thing that should jump out at you at this point is the environmental noise. If it doesn't, don't worry, you're not alone. The longer you train your ears, the more attuned they will be to these frequencies and where those frequencies actually lie across the spectrum. Okay, that environmental noise that you're hearing is not a high frequency sound. Let's listen to it again. Now, perhaps you don't have very well trained ears, or maybe you have perfectly trained ears. Either way, the second time listening through this, you probably heard a couple more raindrops than the first time. Your ears slowly become acclimated to environmental noise, and that's why it's really important to deal with this issue proactively. And it's not just environmental noise, it's unnecessary frequency activity is really what it is. That's really what it comes down to. There's a reason why something like birdsong really stands out to us when we're walking around out in the world, and that's because those are high frequency sounds, and they pretty much stand on their own. The rest of the sound that we're hearing that we don't even acknowledge is just kind of this smear of low frequency noise. And when you capture a sound recording outside, all of that frequency information is then recorded. And now you have to deal with it. The same exact thing is true with any instrument or sound that you might be using in your mix. Okay, so the first part of less is more is getting yourself into the habit of making subtractive decisions before you make additive decisions. In other words, instead of bumping up the bass frequencies on a bass instrument, what we should be doing is attenuating or decreasing or removing completely those low end frequencies from everything but those bass instruments. Okay, so it's addition through subtraction. Okay, so less actually is more. It's just that you need to get through the entire concept before you can start to trust and believe in it. So let's just open up an EQ, and we'll just leave the sound loop in here once we get started. And I'm going to slowly shape this sound by removing frequencies that are incredibly unnecessary. And we won't complete this today. We won't actually complete this sound. We're not after isolating just individual raindrops or anything. This is simply a lesson in less is more and how to get your mixes very clean. Okay, so the key to making this happen is the high pass filter. It's also called a low cut filter by some folks. And it's not just the high pass filter that's important here, but the high pass filter is going to be your reminder to approach things with a subtractive mindset before you begin adding. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and we'll start playing our sound here. We're going to turn on our analyzer, and the very first thing you'll notice is if this is a recording of rain, why in the world is all of this stuff down here in the low end happening here? Okay, so we'll just go ahead and we'll turn on our low cut or our high pass filter, and we'll start to roll this off. And this is going to seem pretty extreme at first, but your ears will acclimate. Okay, you should begin hearing a difference pretty soon here, around 100. For those who have less trained ears, it'll be closer to 200 that you'll be hearing the first significant change. Okay, and we'll turn this off really quick. And you should be able to perceive a difference already. We're going to continue to roll this up, and you'll see that right around here is around where all of this noise activity stops. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to roll it all the way up there. And then we're going to change our curve. Okay. And now we're going to work from left to right here. Okay. That's about right. Okay. So these are pretty significant changes, each one of them. Individually may not seem like it, but add them all up at the end of the day, and they make a very big difference. Okay, we don't want to take all of the environmental noise out. We just want to remove a fair bit so everyone tuning into this can hear exactly what we're doing, can hear the changes. Okay, so it's a constant balance of reduction and then finding the bandwidth that's appropriate for your sound. And usually in environmental recordings like this, and oftentimes any kind of synthesized sound, almost all sounds have really nasty, shrill, resonant peaks hidden in them somewhere. So we'll just use this band really quick. We'll boost this up a bit, and you should be able to hear something as we sweep across these. We'll find it. There's almost always at least one, usually several sounds. We'll just go ahead and make this even more narrow. Increase it more. This is the best way to find... Oh, you can kind of hear... You can hear it. You can hear this resonance. Okay, you know what? It may not get any worse than that. I'm just going to back that out a little bit. Okay, so this is another key to a clean mix, is these things will pop out more. They'll be more noticeable as you take away the low end. So oftentimes you might need to make a pretty surgical removal of noise or resonance up here in the higher frequencies, even though the end goal is to clear up the bass elements, these lower frequencies. And then we might even just kind of give a small bump up here to our high end to get those crispy little raindrops shining through. Okay, so your ears should have acclimated by now, and this sounds like a pretty decent recording of rain outside. Now we can remove more sound, more noise that's unnecessary, but let's go ahead and turn this EQ off all at once, and you can be the judge of just how much bass frequency, low end frequency presence there was in this recording that really didn't need to be there. Here we go. And again with the EQ. Okay, you can actually hear the sound of the rain kind of washed out in the background as it falls all over the place, and then you can hear those tiny little raindrops up front. Couldn't really hear that before. Now, why did we choose this sound, and how is this supposed to translate into more bass in your projects? Well, just imagine, and after this lesson you won't have to imagine, you can go find out for yourself. You can listen to any sound you like and prove it for yourself. But just imagine if almost 100% of the sounds that you use in your music projects that are not bass instruments have bass frequencies. That means they have activity in these lower frequency ranges in the same exact places where your bass instruments or your bass elements are most active. Then every other sound should have those frequencies removed to make, or at least attenuated a bit, to make room for those bass instruments to really pop. And if you don't, that's where the conflict starts, and that's where muddiness starts to occur. The same thing happens in these mid-range areas, especially in music with multiple stringed instruments and vocals happening at the same time. Right around this 500 mark or so is a pretty typical culprit. Bass music with a lot of kick and snare with several layered synths as well as heavy bass instruments, you're usually going to find some muddiness down around 250 or so as well. Now those can be pretty tricky because, you know, obviously there are some drum sounds around 250. That's the main focal frequency for a lot of those sounds. The same is true with, say, vocals around 500. So, you know, just apply that same thought to like a bass guitar or a bass synth. You know, if it's really rocking around here, around 75 hertz or 100 hertz, something like that, then you certainly don't want anything else in your mix touching those areas. Just like you want to roll off everything, you know, below at least 50 or so, maybe 60 hertz, just to protect this area that you can then place sub bass into. That you can then control and add some serious sonic impact to your mix. But that's it. I know it's a bit of a lengthy explanation, but hopefully this super simplified example of just what environmental noise exists around us at all times, and that can be correlated or translated into any sound that you encounter. There is going to be some frequency activity that is simply not necessary. It's not essential to that sound. And you want to remove as much of that as possible without altering the sound itself much at all, if at all. You can still make a ton of room for the other sounds in your mix. So that's it. One simple step. Apply this to every single sound in your mix. Even some of your bass elements, some of your bass sounds will need some of this high pass filtering. Okay, and here's why. Bass frequencies, those low frequencies, the lower the frequency it is, the harder it is to move those frequencies through the air, the more energy it takes to move them through the air. So it makes sense that if we cut those unnecessary frequencies out of all the other instruments, that bass is going to come flying out of those speakers as soon as it hits. Okay, that one bass instrument that's really, the focal point that you want, that's what's going to happen. All right, so again, um, that's it. High pass filter. It's that simple. Just remember, high pass filter. Um, Also called a low cut filter. And it's the far left on your EQ. And that's it. Hope this helps. Hope you enjoy some cleaner mixes and some easier mixing sessions from here on out. Thanks again for stopping by, and we will see you again soon. Cheers.